I'm making two videos about batteries that took way too long to get out of my mouth. The battery analysis. Now, I made some earlier videos about batteries, and I kind of was a little arrogant, thinking I could just get straight into it. I've got a few little sections on battery analysis. I've got an introductory section where I give you some PowerPoints, and I kind of discuss this key issue and this key confusing thing about batteries, which is the difference between a kilowatt or a megawatt. In this case, I have a diagram. There's 1 hour of solar power. It produces some 1 hour of sunlight. It produces some solar power. You charge the battery, and then you have an hour of light later on. Now, if your battery has a storage capacity, if it has a storage capacity of 10 hours or 10 megawatts or 5 hours or 5 megawatts, so what? You need this. You cannot store more than the 1 megawatt, and no matter how much you discharge, you're limited by the capacity of the battery. In a second case, if you have 4 hours of sunlight, is that 1, 2, 3, 4? You put them all into the battery, and then maybe the battery, instead of having 1 megawatt, maybe it has 4 hours of storage. So it can get all this solar power into it, and then if it only had 1 hour out, who cares? You're limited by the capacity. But if you have 4 hours, you can put it out. You can store it for the 4 hours and put it in. Now the reason I'm introducing that is because I've redone the microgrid analysis of a battery, and I strongly believe, I think battery analysis is complicated. I really believe it's complicated. It's a lot more complicated than solar analysis. It's somewhat more complicated probably than wind analysis, although there's less P90s and all that stuff. So what I have done is I've put a file on here, and this file I have to thank a friend of mine named Noel in Philippines, and he said, look what I need to take and explain this to either my own management at my company, or I need to explain this to a client, or I need to show people what's going on. And things get so confusing, and you use terms like LCOS, which is complete bullshit. Doesn't mean anything. How do I do it? So what I did with him, we had a kind of earlier little analysis, and we tried to make a dashboard. What an idiotic kind of thing, but whatever, a dashboard. And in this dashboard, we're trying to show, okay, here's some loads you have. And when I did this, stop yelling at me, stop yelling at me. It's only 1 hour and 1 day. You can extend this. If you don't know how to copy and paste to the right, well, figure it out. You can copy this and make it 1 month or 1 year. Who cares? But for presentation, it's nice to kind of take 1 day. And this 1 day doesn't start at the beginning of the day. It starts in this case, hour 4, and you go to the nighttime, and then you go have some lights for your children to read their school books. And you don't have much air conditioning, maybe a little bit of refrigerators. That's your load. And right now, you meet all this load through diesel power. And the diesel power has some capacity, and it has a fuel cost. And this fuel cost is the killer. And so you pay for all this load with diesel capacity. And you have to work through what the real cost of diesel is, and you have to understand this. Now, there's a second file that instead of starts with diesel capacity, it goes through retail rates. So we take the same sort of load, and I meant to go backwards here. I am sorry, stupid thing. Okay. And so that's how you meet the load. And then if you pay all these fuel costs, you get a bill for an annualized bill. You take this one day and assume the same day occurs every year. Don't yell at me about that. Don't yell, don't yell, don't yell. You can fix that. For right now, that's your annual bill. And then you say, oh, no, well, that diesel power costs so much. Let's go into the middle here and put some solar power in. And when we put the solar power in, it depends on what kind of profile you have for the solar power. So here's the amount of solar power, the profile you have. It goes up in the middle of the day. This is around noontime. Goes down at nighttime, and at nighttime when you use your load, there's not much. And I call that non-coincident. And if you notice, there's a drop-down box for all of these. So let's put some solar power in. Now, when you put solar power in, you have to decide how much capacity you put in. You have the cost per kilowatt, which I've gone through so many other places, and there's a revolution going on, and that cost per kilowatt for a big system, I think, is high. But whatever. And then the carrying charge is absolutely an enormous issue. And it incorporates taxes, it incorporates debt, credit spreads, it incorporates debt to capital, it required returns. It incorporates so much. And it should be a real carrying charge. It should be adjusted for inflation. If you don't understand carrying charges, which is really a large project finance model that's really underneath this, you don't get it. So you take this number, multiply it by the 8, and add O&M, and that's your fixed cost of solar. And then because you're in a solar high case, you've got a really high capacity factor, and your average cost of solar for the year, spread over a year, per megawatt hour in USD is 32.99, which is a whole heck of a lot lower than the cost of diesel. And you would love to just run your whole system with solar, but here's the nighttime problem. And this illustrates, if you don't understand the load shapes and the timing issues when you're doing the battery, you haven't done nothing at all. Okay. And then what you do is you press a button down here. You press a button that says optimize solar, and it says let's put more or less solar in, more, until we put so much solar in, we're wasting a lot of it. I don't know if I put the wasted solar. I didn't put the waste. Yeah, I put it, the wasted. I put it. Ugh, God, I have this horrible. I'm not really American. I have this American accent that I hate. Here, this solar megawatt hour is right here. Okay. So we put too much in. And then, oh shit. Okay, then I'm going to skip down here. Then we put some batteries in, and if we put the batteries in, here's the wonderful news about putting batteries in. We can use a whole bunch more solar, because we can take this solar and move it over to the nighttime. And when you're making a model, you have to understand how you're going to charge the battery and then discharge it. And you have to decide what's the battery capacity, what's the solar capacity, what's the diesel capacity. And when you do all of this stuff, the electric cost has gone down. You account for the cost of the diesel, and now you have many lower megawatt hours of diesel. And then you figure out, well, what's our cost of solar for the year? Remember, I annualized this for a year, and here's the cost of the solar. And then the cost of the batteries is so damn high. And you have to figure out all this stuff about, is the cost of the battery on a per kWh basis, per kW basis? You have to account for the degradation of batteries, like the degradation of my brain. You have to account for this efficiency loss, and you have to get all of this stuff in a model, and then you have to do what I am trying to do, which is to explain it. And here the carrying charge is absolutely a crucial, maybe almost as important as the cost of the thing itself, but there are a whole bunch of other things. So if you say, I'm going to take this much battery capacity, multiply it by the fixed cost, that's the cost of the batteries. I put it down here. You have the cost of the solar. You put it down here. And when you do all of that, putting the batteries in saved you, didn't save you in this case. Yeah, it saved you a little bit of money, not a lot. It allowed you to put a lot more solar in and saved you some money. If we could possibly get the cost of the batteries down, we could put more in, and then we could put more solar. And you see how it's all interrelated. And trying to do something and trying to call it the unsubsidized, levelized cost of storage? What a lot of bullshit. And then you say, oh no, this is from the Lazard study. Let's do some football field diagrams and let's compute the cost per kilowatt per year. What does that mean? This cost per kilowatt per year? 500? That's the cost of a power plant per ever, not per year. How could you do this? Okay, and then this is a little example of what I have. Now I'm just going to open the file and go through a few little things how it works, and I hope I have it open. I have this file. This is the file you download. It's called Microgrid with batteries. And what you do, here's the kind of screen. Now let's say I want to put a scenario. You go through a diesel-only scenario, okay? There's no optimization at all. And then you go through a solar plus diesel, and what you do is you put in optimized solar, and it just goes around. It's like a data table, basically. It goes around and figures out how much is the right amount of solar to put in, and it depends on the carrying charge rate and a couple of other things, and it's kind of converging and minimizing this cost, figuring out how much solar capacity, because you could put it by hand in too, and then we get either more or less. Now that the analysis is not finished. I'm going to press this one. It's going to take a little bit of time. I'm going to have to I might turn off. It's not take a bit of time, maybe half a minute. But what this one is going to do is going to try to put different solar and different battery and then run the batteries. So you press this one, and it's going around a little bit. Okay, and okay, I just reran it. This time I put this much solar, this much battery power. I changed the carrying charge a little bit. You put a lower carrying charge in, and you get more savings because the cost of the battery went down and the cost of the solar is different. Now, the way this really works is you put in some parameters. I put in all the load shapes. I put in a database of battery costs. I used Lazard for this. You could find other sources as well, I suppose. You put in some, you kind of put things together a little bit, and you put the battery selection together and the cost of the solar. And the real task is to make a little table. You start with the load. Here's the load, and you subtract the solar away from the load. So if we just have diesel, there's no load. You just put in the load for the day, and you could copy this to the right to get it. Oh no, Stefano, I'm not ready. Shit. Oh no, what did I do now? Oh God. My kid, Stepson up there. You know what he does? He got 8,000 views on some stupid video, and I'm going to get two views on this one. Where was I? Now, if you put in, so right now we don't have any balance of the battery. We're going to figure out how much we charge, how much we lose, how much we discharge. These are the big equations. They're a little bit of a minimum equations on both of these. And I'm going to go through this in a second video a little more, but then you put some solar in. And I didn't put spinning reserve in here. I've got to put spinning reserve. I've got to put a minimum level that this diesel plant would have to operate, because obviously you can't just switch it on and off. I know that. Okay? It's not hard to incorporate in an analysis like this. It really isn't. You have to start with a simple case and then move forward. Okay? And so now I have no load. And then I have a bunch of this load at night. Okay, and then I have some wasted solar power, and you have to make sure that when you compute how much diesel you're actually using, here's some graphs and all this, you have to compute how much load you have, and if you've wasted some solar, that's just gone. You don't get any of that. Okay? And then we go through, so here's the load minus the solar. This is all the wasted stuff. Then you put the battery in. Okay, and with a battery, and you can go through the drop-down boxes and all of that stuff. I'm not doing this time. And then you say, okay, we're going to charge. And we're not going to ever charge by more than the capacity of the battery. And maybe you have even a... you can't even use the total capacity, so you might have to make an adjustment there. And you're not going to charge it if you've pushed so much load into the battery that it's full, you can't charge it anymore. So you better put a minimum for that. And that says how much is the maximum storage we have on this capacity. It depends on the capacity of the battery and this a thing called the duration of the battery. I hope you can see things are a tiny bit more complicated. And then you figure out, well, how much do you want to charge? And this is the set point business that I'm going to put in a different video. You have to figure out how you're going to operate the battery. In this case, basically, you're going to charge everything that you have. I made a tiny little adjustment, but you're going to charge all the negative load. And then you go forward and forward and forward, and oh no, then we need some load. And how much are we going to discharge? Well, we're going to try to discharge as much as possible. But we can't discharge by more than the capacity, and we can't discharge by more than the balance we have in the battery itself. So we have to make an opening balance, see how much is taken away, put in, see how much is taken away. It's like an inventory. It's like a stock. It's like you can't sell things you don't have on the shelves. That's really what the key thing to modeling this stuff is. And it's okay, it's a little bit tricky. It's a little bit tricky, and you should go through this. You don't should. That was kind of an idiotic thing to say. Whatever, if you want. But if you want to look at batteries, looking at some silly levelized cost of storage, how can it mean anything? It depends on so much more. Whether it's going to be economic or not, it depends so much on the carrying charge. So you keep going and you keep using this battery until you have nothing left. And in this case, I went all the way through and I had still some left in storage. And then you see how the chronology is so important. You've got to start at the point at which you're going to charge the battery. So what I do is I move the loads around a little bit. This is our loads. This is our coincident loads, and we try things with maybe a coincident load and a flat load and a non-coincident load. I think I said coincident when it was non-coincident. Doesn't really matter. Okay, are you picking every word I'm saying? All right, so that's our microgrid analysis. I hope you can use it to think about things a little bit. Goodbye.